Hello, everybody, and welcome back to an episode of Starseed Chats. Now, I haven't done an interview in a little while, but I wanted to have a very special guest on who has a very interesting story. We've been talking a bit about time travel and time travelers and some of these interesting covert or secret space program groups. And Daryl is a Navy in the actual, Earth Navy veteran and has some very interesting experiences within some of these different programs, including Solar Warden, also what's known as the Dark Fleet, and contact with Taigetan extraterrestrials, also known as Pleiadians, but specifically from Taygeta. So I'm super excited to be diving into this. I think this sort of information is starting to come up more and more, and a lot of us have actually taken part in some of these programs. Daryl's luckily enough to, I guess it can be kind of a dual-edged sword remembering some of these things, but has memories of this, and I think we're going to be seeing that more and more. So thank you so much for coming on, Daryl. I really appreciate talking to you and having you on.
Yes, of course. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I already kind of gave a little bit of a background on who you are, but is there anything that you'd like to add on that? And then we can kind of go into your story from the beginning, take us back into whenever you joined the Navy and how this unfolded for you.
Well, I mean, my background, I joined officially in January of '99, and I was in Naval Mobile Construction Battalion 7. I went to, many places around the world. I went to Spain. I went to Puerto Rico, Honduras, Japan. I went to Iraq. And, I mean, that's just like my background. St. Maughan, where I joined the SSP, that happened in 2004, and that was in England, St. Maughan, England. So, but that was like my background. So that was my second enlistment, is what it was.
Okay, very interesting. So that's what makes your experience, I don't know if I'd say like eye-catching or catchy or more legitimate, because it can be really difficult finding evidence for being involved in these covert programs by design. But you were actually in the Navy too. So can you tell us, just kind of take us back into how you were approached?
Well, I mean, the way it happened to begin with was I had a watch, no, actually, I was, one of the guys came into the garage because I didn't work in the underground base officially. And one of the guys came into the garage and said, you need to escort some civilian workers from the corporation Siemens into the underground base. So I went to the underground base, and I saw the guys there at the quarterdeck, which is like the lobby of the base. And, it's where you check in. It's like where the petty officer of the watch is. It's like the headquarters of the base. And there was a sliding glass door. And the door opened, and then there was something that looked like almost like a metal detector you would see at a, I don't know, airport or courthouse or something like that. Rectangular size, rectangular top. Had a little ramp you had to step over with the black and yellow caution tape. And the worker from the, Corporation Siemens, the first one, he said, I'm not walking through that bloody thing. So I thought, I don't want to walk through it either. And there was a guard behind a stainless steel table, like a British guard, with a beret on. He had like a rifle over his shoulder, and he said, no, you walk through. So I walked through it. And I watched them fix a pump, and there was like white, blue, and red stripes on the ground. White was secret, blue was top secret, and red was above top secret. And there were certain hallways that were just only red, like red went everywhere. White went to just down main halls, and blue went to more places. But there were certain hallways that were just red lines, and they were dark, and I didn't understand why they were dark. Anyways, I watched them fix this pump, and that was the end of that night. And
so why, real quick, why do you think they didn't want you to walk through that?
Oh, I mean, the guards, it was something called a scanner.
Mm-hmm.
And the scanner, it did everything. Like, it realized I smoked, I drank. Like, the petty officer of the watch told me about this later on. And it also knew, like, your IQ score. It knew if you had any clots in your body. It knew if anything was wrong with you. I guess the guys, they just didn't want that kind of intrusion on their privacy, so they didn't want to walk through the scanner. But I was told that was the reason why I was there. Basically, was to walk through the scanner. I think everybody had to kind of go through this, like initiation, see what their scores were. Because the higher IQ you have, the more likely you are to have telepathic abilities. Seeing down timelines is how they referred it, which meant being able to see into the future of yourself, future of others. That's what ETs call it. They call it looking down timelines.
Very interesting.
And I mean, that happened that day. And then I had a midnight to 4 a.m. watch. They call it like balls to 4 and like 0000 to 4 a.m. And I saw Michael Aquino. And he's like started the Temple of Set. He was part of the Presidio case, which is like a military base in California called Presidio. And there was a lot of controversy about him. And I just saw him. He had like the turned up eyebrows. I recognized him right away. He was very gray. His hair was white. And I don't know. I talked to him for a little bit. He kind of creeped me out, and I said, I have to do another round, sir. I was like doing rover watches, what they call it, where you walk around the base and make sure nothing's happening.
And just to pause real quick, so Michael Aquino, that is a public Satanist, right?
Yes, he was on Oprah. He was on Geraldo. He was, like this Presidio case. These kids in this preschool accused him of, molestation and things like that on this the daycare center of the military base.
Oh my God.
And he was just all over the news, and he was pretty much dead to rights, but he got away with it anyway. And it was just pretty much all over the news, so everybody knew about this guy.
Okay.
Yeah. And he was a very public figure back in the 80s and everything else.
Okay.
And yeah, so I saw him, and then I had another 0000 to 4 a.m. watch on the next Friday. And I was just sitting down, and the petty officer of the watch said, "What do you think about that?" And he pointed at the computer monitor, and it looked like a black and white picture of like a stereotypical gray or something, like it was looking up at a camera or something in a room. And I said, "Well, did you get that off the internet?" And he said, "No, look." And next to that sliding glass door, there was like this big window that stopped really low to the ground and really high to the ceiling. And there was like a room behind it, like a desk and chairs. And I never knew what that room was for, that window. And it was this gray, but it was standing right behind this window. I was told later they were called drones. They're kind of like a organic machine with a shared consciousness. And it was kind of light brown. It had a fold of skin from the tear ducts, like down to its cheekbones, had big black eyes, no ears, no real nose, a small mouth, big head. I don't know. It was probably about 3.5, maybe 4 feet tall. It was very short, probably 3.5 feet tall. And he said, "Do you mind if it comes in here?" And I said, "Does it mind if I look at it?" And because I didn't know, if it was like it would attack me if I made eye contact with it too long. I was very like upset, frightened, scared. I didn't know if it would run away. I never thought I'd see something like this.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it stepped out of that room, walked through these sliding glass doors, and that guard was behind him, the same guard. And it had like a pistol in his hand, what I thought was a pistol, like polished metal. And it had very long fingers. Like it had to kind of carry its hands in C shapes when it walked. Like it could pick something off the ground without bending its back or knees.
Wow.
And long palms and long fingers. And I walked out very abruptly, kind of robotic. It was kind of disturbing the way it walked. And I kept on saying gun. I just got back from Iraq. So I said gun, 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 gun. And they all said it's not a gun. And it said it like in my head. Like I could hear the voice of it saying it's not a gun in my head. And it held its hand out. And I didn't know what it was. Maybe I'm thinking it's a syringe like from Star Trek. Is it going to inject me with something? Is it going to take something from me? And then there was like this government issue, like Dell computer sitting on the ground. And it was a drill, what it had in its hand. And it just took it apart. It didn't have to guide the bit in or anything. It just really quick, one after another. And it was catching the screws in the other hand. Went to the back, went to the other side, slid off the top, popped out 2 gigs of RAM, put them on top of the table. It grabbed 2 more right next to it, slammed them in. It was all one motion. It just did things like a machine. Slid the top back down, and it kind of flicked its wrist and was able to set the screw in between its finger like every time. It was kind of like boop, 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 and it just went one after another and drilled it up, put it back together. And then it just stood in front of me and kind of let me look at it. And I turned this way and it moved its head for me the other way. I looked at its hands, it moved its hands back and forth. And I got kind of bored with it. And it just, yeah, it was just like, and it went back in. I just turned around. I said, "Can I touch it? Can I touch you in my head?" And it didn't respond. And I tried to lean over to touch it, and the petty officer of the watch said, "Don't touch it." And, it had no nipples, no navel, no genitals. It was just smooth, but it had the 5 fingers. It didn't have 3 fingers like they say, like I've heard. It had 5 fingers.
Mm-hmm.
And it went back
well,
in.
I'm sure there's many different kinds too. Many different types.
Oh, sure. Yeah. And as far as like I remember from in the being in the program, they were kind of like in the Dark Fleet, like preventive maintenance. They were always running around the ship, kind of doing things, fixing things. They were always running around everywhere.
Okay.
But yeah.
And then we'll get into what the Dark Fleet is in just a minute. For those who don't know.
Yeah, and it went back into the underground base, and the petty officer of the watch said, "What did you think about that?" I said it was, pretty weird. And he said, "Do you think you could work around something like that?" I said, "I don't see why not." And he noticed I was pinching my thigh, like as hard as I could. Like I was sitting down, and I was pinching my thigh. And he said, "Do you think you're dreaming?" And I said, "No, I want to have a mark in case you wipe my mind, so maybe I'll remember this." Because I was kind of thinking, like, are they going to wipe my mind after this? I was going through sci-fi things in my head to try to figure this out.
Right.
And he said, "No, you're going to remember this for now." And then he said, he told me all the things that the machine said. Like I said earlier, he's like, you smoke, you don't have any clots, that's because you drink. I drank at the time and everything else. And he was just going through all like my stuff. And he said, "You're smart." And I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah, like really smart." And I said, "Like what? Like 140, 150 IQ?" And he said, "More like 190, 195. And he showed me like these color-coded like lines. And he said, "See, you're the second smartest guy on base." And there was like one above me, and there was one right below, and there was kind of a gap, and like the rest of the guys. And they just kind of like went up and down a little bit like that. There was just like, all these color-coded lines. And he was asking me things like, "Do you have any hobbies?" And I said, "Well, I used to play classical guitar." And he said, "They'll like that." And he said, "Because you'll make officer with your IQ scores, and you'll have plenty of time to practice." And I said, like, "Who's they?" Like, "They'll like that." And he's like, "Well, there's Germans up there." He's like, I said, "Up where?" He's like, "In the moon and beyond." He didn't really call it space. He just kind of said up there. He said, he went to the moon all the time. There's a portal in the underground base, and it takes you inside the moon. And all the underground bases have it and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Which is what they call jump rooms, right?
Well,
do they call it that?
Yeah, but I mean, the XO, Robert later on explained to me, he said it was a looking glass technology, is what he called it. It was like a kind of looking glass where you could observe something at a different time or somewhere else, but you can also step through the looking glass. He called it looking glass. But I mean, it's the same thing. Jump room, it's a portal. It's a portal where it can also be used to see the past very accurate, and the future, I think he said by 94%. 94% accuracy in the future, 4% different outcome, and a 2% variable is kind of like how he put it, as far as how accurate looking glass was.
So do you know where this looking glass technology comes from?
I mean, it's just called ET tech, is what the military calls it. But he said
tech?
ET tech, yeah. And it's just all underground bases have it. All underground bases have med beds. All underground bases have healing tanks. All underground bases have age regression. And age regression is different than med beds. It's more like a stasis chamber that kind of puts you in stasis for 2 weeks, and you get a series of injections over a period of 2 weeks. And that slowly age regresses you 20 years. And that's kind of like how the age regression works. And yeah, he told me about the underground. I mean, this is like further on in the story, but yeah, he told me about, I don't know, we got into a war a long time ago with the Reptiles, the Draconian Empire. We got outside help, but we participated in this war. And the contract, it was a stalemate. And the deal is we get the above ground and they get the underground. So all underground bases actually belong to reptiles. So that's why all that technology is there and things like that. But I think those things are changing. I think it's changed. He told me that, you know, we're working on it as far as clearing things out. I have memories of helping clearing out even this base alone, coming back to this base, which has to do with like ET warfare, which is a lot of time travel cat and mouse. That's kind of like how ET warfare works. It's like changing timelines, altering timelines, things like that. So like a lot of how it works. But yeah, I mean, he just told me just all these different things, and he said that there's, you know, different ETs up there, and I'll get to meet them. And I don't know, it kind of just happened that way.
Yeah.
And
So they were, yeah, everything you just said, fantastic, and like I'm kind of geeking out right now. But like it resonates a lot, and that's, I feel that, I get that, I'm seeing that as well. Very fascinating stuff. So they were basically going through the scanner, kind of like backtracking a little bit, going through the scanner. They were vetting you to see if you were would be a good asset for this covert program to go up into space.
yes, vetting me with that, and also letting me experience this drone to see if I would run away or would I attack it. Because I heard rumors, you know, in the barracks. I lived in the barracks, and there was rumors of guys, you know, running out of the quarterdeck like screaming or something. You know what I mean? There's a reptile trying to get me or something. And you know, guys would talk. Guys, you know, guys who work in a ground base, I would play Halo with them and things like that. And they would talk about reptiles they saw, things like that, walking around the underground base just very nonchalant. And yeah, it was just very surreal. It was a very strange experience because I came from, you know, I worked construction. I was very blue collared. I wasn't, you know, I was raised Christian, and that was about it. I really didn't care about ETs. I knew people that read books. It was something that really wasn't something I really didn't care about. It wasn't a part of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so that day was over, and then on the Monday, the XO, the executive officer, second in command of the base, he came to the garage where I worked. And they asked me, well, the guy asked me, he said, you know, why did you become a CB with your scores? And I said, well, I had a marijuana paraphernalia charge when I was 19. So that's like all I could do was construction or being cooked. That was kind of like my situation. Yeah. So, and, you know, guys came up with this to me over the weekend. I remember I woke up the next day and it was just such a strange memory that I kind of blocked it. First woke up in the morning, it was just something my mind couldn't really wrap around, and I blocked it. I remember I looked at my thigh and I had the blood blister.
Ah.
I was like, oh God, like it was real. You know, I thought it was just like a strange, like my brain was trying to convince myself it was not real.
Yeah.
And one of the guys came up to me and he said, so what did you think? You know, this is like Saturday morning. And I said, what? He's like, you know, big black eyes, big head, long smooth hair, kind of creepy looking. And I said, oh, right. Like, I forgot. He's like, yeah, a lot of people do. And he said, like, you know, and he asked, everybody was like saying, why are you a CB? You're like, you know, you're so smart. And I was like, you know, I have this charge. And that's why. And I never really thought of, I wasn't honors or anything like that in school. I even told the guy that. I said, I did all right in school. And he said, school is no indication of true intelligence, is how he put it.
Right. Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I mean, the way that they test you in school, that's not. There you go.
Yeah, just, you know, read and regurgitate is kind of what school is. And
Right.
yeah. And so I saw the XO on Monday. He came to the garage, which doesn't happen. That, you know, you'll go to their office, but they don't usually come to you. And he came directly to where I work, my workstation. And he asked us, you know, one of the guys came in, said the XO wants to see you. I said, is this common? I thought maybe because I was new, I really didn't know what was happening. It was just one thing after another. It was like one strange thing after another was happening to me. And it kind of kept you in this, you didn't know where to put your footing. It was just like, I was kind of bewildered.
Yeah.
And I said, you know, is this common? He said, no. I was like, the XOs never come here to see someone. So I went out and outside and grabbed my hat and I said, how you doing, sir? And he's like, oh, how you doing, Petty Officer James? And at first he was calling me Petty Officer James. And then he started calling me Mr. James as we got further away from the garage. We were walking down the sidewalk and just talking. And only officers refer to each other as Mr. in the Navy. So he's kind of referring to me as like an officer already. And he asked me he said, you know, he said, what do you think? And I said, yeah, it's pretty strange. And talking about the IQ scores. Oh, and this guy in the barracks who told me about, what did you think? Kind of creepy looking. He said, you know who the smartest person on base is? And I said, no. He said it's the XO. He said he has over 200 IQ. And he brought that up, my IQ, and I said, well, you're smarter than me. And he said, well, who told you? Because I guess the guy wasn't supposed to say anything, and I really didn't realize it. And I said, well, and I was like, but don't tell him, because everybody knows. Everybody was coming up to me. It was just everybody was asking me questions.
Mm-hmm. And where? So, remind me again. Was this in Europe? This base?
St. Morgan, England.
Okay.
Yeah, it's in the Cornwall area, like the peninsula.
Okay.
Right south of Wales. And Robert later on told me that they call it the Cornish Cliffs. There's like there's like cliffs that come down into the ocean. And they're made out of like slate and granite. A majority of a lot of the pool tables that are slate, the tops of pool tables are made out of slate. They come from Cornwall. Tin mining. But he said because of the waves that were crashing into the Cornish Cliffs for millions and millions of years, there's actually caverns like all over Cornwall and things like that. And that's where like that movie Hot Fuzz, where they're kind of making fun out of it's like a British movie about how all the like weird stuff happens in Cornwall. There's been like documentaries of like entire villages. They're all like the high officials are all kind of like linked into some sort of like weird satanic cult and with sacrifices and stuff like that. And this happens like in Cornwall, and that's like what that movie Hot Fuzz was kind of making fun of. And it's just like Merlin's Cave is there and things like that. A lot of stuff like that is in Cornwall.
Wow.
And they consider themselves the true Britons. That they theorize that's where King Arthur was from Cornwall. It's considered more of like a Celtic nation than a like an English nation. It's considered like the true Britons is what they consider themselves.
Mm. But so it sounds there's a lot of probably portals and energy. The energy is supporting all of this weird stuff, similar to like because I've heard of Cornwall. I don't know too much about it, but yeah, in some of these other areas like Mount Shasta, Sedona, tons of other areas in like the United States that just the weird. It's like I don't know if I'd call it like a breeding ground for weird stuff, but kind of the energy supports it.
Yes,
with the alignment and everything, portals, just all sorts of the underground caverns, the mountains.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the caverns, and I mean things live in like they live in the underground. That's where a lot of these beings live, and like people don't realize that you really don't have to go to space. If you want to see extraterrestrials and things like that, they're below your feet.
Right.
Yeah. And like people don't realize that, and that's why these underground bases exist. And
Yep.
yeah, so he went on to Gary McGinnon, and this was like a current event pretty much at the time, and he was from Scotland, so it was the UK area. And he asked me if I ever heard of Gary McGinnon, and I was in Iraq at the time when this was happening, and the Iraq War was happening, and they just kind of swept it under the rug because the war was happening, and it really didn't draw that much attention. And he said, it's all real. He hacked into the U.S. Navy, the U.S. Army, and NASA. And in the U.S. Navy, he found files, Project Solar Warden, volatile chemicals coming out of the Earth, going off world, extraterrestrial beings with ranks and social security numbers, pictures of cigar-shaped craft over the moon, like different pictures of craft. He found all this stuff and put it on the internet. And he told me the only reason he wasn't extradited, they said it was because he was autistic, but he said the actual reason was because, this was before the Patriot Act, so you still had rights. And if they would have taken it to trial, he would have called witnesses. He would have called all the witnesses on all the files he found, and it would have blew the whole lid off Solar Warden, so they just kind of let it go. And yeah, and he told me this, and he says this is real, and he said that with your scores, I'll guarantee you make commander and become pilot of a 4-kilometer long starship. And I was just amazed. And he said it looked similar to the ships from Battlestar Galactica, like the large ship that you see on Battlestar Galactica.
Mm.
And yeah, he just told me about Solar Warden, and I thought about it. And I thought if I'm going to do this, I'll do this for something. So I told him, I said, my father died of something called a widowmaker, which was he just had like a piece of cholesterol build up in one of his arteries and it broke off and he died. And I said, if we had technology like that, that would have saved his life. That scanner I walked through, because it picked up clots. And I said, why don't we have technology like that for the public?
Right.
And he went on about, population control and everything else. And I said, well, there has to be a side that wants to bring this to the public. And he said, you mean like a trader? And I said, no, sir, I mean just like a side. And he goes, well, there is. And I said, well, if you can get me on that side, then I'll do it. And he agreed, shook hands, saluted, and he said, one more thing, Mr. James, you're going to be escorted by a reptile, and he's big. And I really didn't know what he was talking about. Like I had no idea what he meant. I just kind of shrugged it off.
Mm-hmm.
And then there were like guys in the barracks where I would, Halo was big at the time, and we used to play Halo a lot. Halo 2 was going to come out like next year or something.
And Halo depicts, I haven't played the game, but I've watched the series, which is on Paramount Plus, and that depicts the super soldiers. It depicts people being taken from their homes and replaced by clones, and they are trained. They, probably get all these injections, something put in there around their spine that suppresses their emotions, feelings, and makes them very strong, very fast, and basically like a super soldier, a weapon.
And he would, well, I mean, the executive officer went into more detail. He said he told me about the 20-year and back. He said, you'll do 20 years. We'll put you in the program for 20 years. After you're done, we'll send you back in time 20 years, age regress you 20 years, and you'll wake up in bed like nothing happened. And I remember just like the age regression part was very hard to believe for me. It was something about time travel I could believe, and wiping your mind I could believe. But there was just something about age regression I found really difficult to believe. And
Yeah.
he said, after what you just saw, you find that hard to believe about the little drone I saw. And I said, well, touche, sir, but yes. And he said, well, it's all real. Like he didn't want to convince me any further. He was just it was just boom, boom, boom. It kind of, like I said, it kind of left me in a complete state of confusion. And I think that was like the goal. You know what I mean? They wanted to get you into this like quickly as possible, so you really didn't know what to think.
Right.
And the whole time I kind of thought like, this is a joke. Like this has to be like a practical, like there's no way. There's like all this stuff, all these things he's talking about.
Yeah, and I want to pause real quick to also share in Star Wars with the age regression thing. That one is a bit hard to believe. For me too. I was like, what? It took me like 2 years to process what the secret space program is and how they do it, and I'm still processing it. But I've gotten pretty far. But it took like 2 years. So I can only imagine with you just getting it back to back, boom, 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 boom. And yeah, I'm sure like what you said, that's done on purpose to just kind of like rush you into it before you even know really what's going on. But on the age regression part, I was surprised to find in Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, they depict this age. They do the age forward, not age regress backwards in this. So they create like these clones, and then they speed up their age. So from my understanding, there's technology that can do both forward and backwards. Really fascinating. So I just wanted to add that there's some disclosure, there's disclosure in a lot of these films.
Well, yeah, even tech can do that. Even tech can kind of accelerate, to get through puberty quickly. A lot of ETs do that. They kind of bypass puberty and they go straight to adult. Yeah, like
interesting.
Yeah. So it takes like, women grow faster than men. I mean, develop quicker than men. So it's like 4 or 5 months for females, and like I think it's like 7 to 8 months for males. They can just bypass right through it, the awkwardness and everything, puberty.
Yeah, I mean, 7th and 8th grade were rough.
And yeah, so we were playing the game Halo, and the guys we're in between games, and we had everything hooked up, and all the cables were out in the hall, and we had like 4 different Xboxes hooked up through cables, like hardwired into each other, and it was like 4 guys on each one. We're playing like the large teams, and we're doing that. So one of the other guys were, they were in charge of, what terrain we were going to use and what weapons we were going to use. So we had like 5 minutes just to talk. And this person out of the blue, he said, yeah, man, I joined the secret space program, and I was in the moon, and there were all these brothels, and you got to sleep with all these women, and it was great. And they would put these shock collars on you, and they would put you in groups, and if somebody in a group didn't work hard enough, they'd shock everyone. And I kind of thought, well, maybe the XO said this to me and just suckered me in to, I'd wind up working in mines or something like that, and I wouldn't be a pilot. And I said, well, the XO himself came up to me and offered me to, become pilot of a 4-kilometer-long starship. I said, did he do that to you? And he goes, no, I just joined it. He's like, they're going to treat you good. He's like, you're going to be up there. It's going to be great. And he said, they're going to put you in a chair, and all you have to do is fight it, and you'll remember. He said, when you come back, they'll put you in a chair after the program, and if you fight it, you'll remember. And I guess that's how he remembered. He seemed to remember a lot. And all of a sudden, like this feedback loop came into the room. And a voice said, now hear this, now hear this. You are now in violations of Article 7 and 8 of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. If you do not stop right now, you will face up to 10 years in prison and $100,000 in fines. That'll be all. And it went away. And I kind of looked around and I said, is there a speaker in here? And one of the guys said, with the technology they have, they don't need speakers. And I said, well, what was that? And he said, we need to stop talking about it because they're listening to us. And then that same person that asked me what I thought about the ET, the drone I saw, the creepy drone, he came up to me and he said, you see those rectangular blocks that are on the radio tower near the underground base? And I said, yes. And he said, that's 5G tech. He said, that's something new they're using on this base. And this was like 2004. And he said that they can take a microwave beam, they can put it into a room, they can see everything, they can hear everything, they can move it around so they can look into different parts of the house or the building, whatever they want to look in, and they can talk if they want. And he said that's what that was, what you heard. And then he said that one of the guys on base told him that there's a kind of technology where they can extract a soul from a person, but they can't do it when they're too young because the body's mostly sedentary because it's used like a vehicle, but they have to do it before puberty for some reason. And he said that's what happened to Aquino. And I said, well, what's in like Aquino's body? And he said, I don't know. Like he had no idea. And it's almost like another being can kind of astral project their consciousness into that body, that empty vessel, and kind of use it, And then,
wow.
And he told me
so you're seeing that a lot with like a lot of the politicians and celebrities and stuff. I'm sure it's like, the puppet. I've seen the visual of that. It's literally something else that is controlling them.
Okay. Yeah. And he said they would go in, and he said he went into the underground base and he walked by the break room, and I guess there was a long window by the break room so you could look in if you want to see someone, if they're in case they were in there. And he said he saw Aquino just sitting down and staring at like a blank TV screen, like a TV that wasn't on for, I don't know, like a 12-hour shift. And then he walked back out, and he said Aquino was just sitting there in the same spot, just like blank faced and, just staring at an empty or at a blank TV. So he brought that up. And yeah, he was just, people were telling me different things, and it was strange. And it was just, I don't know, a bizarre base to say the least.
Yeah.
And so, trying to think if there were other things that I heard, but the night before I was going to join the program, it was, it always seemed to be a Friday night. Friday nights whenever you were introduced to this, Friday nights whenever you were, put into the program. And I think it was probably because the weekend, in case something happened with the time travel or something. I don't, if you missed a day, you could still make it to work on Monday. So I was in the TV room of the barracks, and somebody's door was open across the hall. And it was kind of like one of those situations where they were acting like they were talking to someone else, but they wanted me to overhear. And I found out later the command was trying to like kind of acclimatize me to the situation because I didn't work in the underground base and I really wasn't familiar with any of this. And I'd heard about it, but I really wasn't familiar. Oh, and one of the guys, yeah, this is what I was thinking of. One of the guys said, hey, we were playing Halo again. This was a different time. And he said that one of them said, hey, did you see that reptile today in the underground base? And the guy said, yeah, he was big. And another one said, he talked funny. And in my head, I was kind of thinking, even after the XO told me this, I was thinking, like, are there monitor lizards underground that like talk to people? That I said, that you have lizards talk to you, and he said, yes. And I said, so they just walk around on all fours and they talk to you? And he said, no, they walk upright like us. They're humanoid, and they can speak. And he said, you'll see them, because I was not like aware of any of this.
Right, and you're like, yeah, okay, sure.
Exactly, yeah. I was like, well, I'm the new guy, so they're messing with me. Yeah, that was exactly it.
Right.
And then another one of them said that there's elongated skulls in there as well, like the cone heads and things that they find in the skulls of South America with the red hair. And said that they're basically cannibals because they're close enough related to us to where they consume humans, they'll eat humans. And but they're close enough related to where they can have offspring up with us, but the offspring are sterile, kind of like mules. Like when you breed a horse and a donkey together, mules are always sterile. And that kind of explains maybe that you see the Rothschilds where they seem to have the elongated heads, like the old man Rothschild and things like that. They'll have long skulls. So it made me kind of think of that.
Interesting.
And he said that their average IQ was 160, so they're very intelligent. And so, they're above average or over 200 by far, 250, 260. And said that they like
Did you get to see one of those with the elongated skulls, or just heard about them?
I saw one when I was in the caverns, yeah. And it was dark. We were in like, there's underground caverns below the underground base. Always be below underground bases. That's kind of like where they know where to put them because they're near these caverns where these ETs live, these other beings. And it was, I think it had like a kind of like a red robe on, a robe. It had a very big, broad jaw. Because, if you look at their skulls, their molars are like that. Their teeth are huge. So it had this very big, broad jaw. It had what looked like a turban kind of wrapped around its head, like a red turban, but I think it might have been its hair, like wrapped tightly around its skull. And it had large blue eyes, but it kind of had sunken in skin around the eyes, like there was skin sunken in around the eyes, like you see these skulls, the eye sockets are huge, and it did have large eyes, but it had like sunken in area around the eyes. And yeah, it was strange. I had never seen one before, but this was after I got back from the programs.
What did you say? Sorry.
This was after I got back from the program.
Okay, you saw one after.
I saw one. I hadn't seen one before in the program.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, sounds like some sort of a hybrid deal.
I have no idea, but I don't know a lot of their background. But
okay, so now we're back to you being told, or is there anything else that you wanted to say about your kind of your friends or the other members before you met the Reptilian, before you got to see it?
Yeah, it was. I was in the lounge and somebody had the door open, across the hall. And like I said, it was like a conversation where he was talking to someone, but he wanted me to overhear it. And he said, "You're going to be taken to a density chamber." He said, "We're third density, and the ETs we work with are fifth density." He said, "You'll become stronger, faster. Your IQ will go up 200 points, and you'll become more of a collective." So it's kind of like a higher, I don't know, realm of reality, I guess you would say. And it's like a way, he's like, they'd be much too fast for you to like work around or work with. You wouldn't even be able to see them. They'd kind of be like a blur of light. It would, it's a completely different realm of reality, I guess you would say. And it was just something I overheard and I didn't think about it at the time. So it came to the point where I was joining the program. It was another Friday night, balls before watch.
Can I interrupt just for a second? I found that explanation of the third density and the fifth density really important, and it also, when the first time I heard you say that, it kind of helped piece together or confirm some things for me too, because so these extraterrestrial beings, they could be interacting with us, they could be standing right in front of you at times, but they're in this higher density, so we don't really like see them, or it may look like kind of like a blur or whatever, which a lot of people will see something out of the corner of their eye, some movement, but then they don't really, I don't know. I see that all of the time. I'll be sitting there and in my apartment and I'll see like a blonde woman walking through and I'm like, okay, they're here. But it's just kind of like barely phased in. And then I've had it happen before too, where they're phasing in more and then the energy gets kind of like static electricity. The more it like the energy shifts in the room. So I just wanted to contribute that and comment on that.
Yeah, well, when I was talking to the XO later on in the story, I was talking to him in his office, and he said he had to wear a belt to be able to interact because he was naturally fifth density. He was from the future, he told me, and he was back when Earth ascended to fifth density. And he had and I said, show it to me, and he said, no, he's like, you didn't want to. I said, show it to me, like, let me see. And he pulled up his uniform, and over top of his undershirt, his T-shirt, he had what looked like almost like black electrical tape, except for it was like that thick. There was no buckle or anything. And he told me that that's why he can interact in third density because he wears this belt. It kind of I don't know, slows him down, makes it so he can interact in our density. And he said that I said, do you wear that around your wife? And he said, no, just when I'm in uniform. He said normally I wear a bracelet. And I said, what do you tell her? He said, I tell her it's just one of those Chinese magnet bracelets, like one of those ones you see on TV and things. But yeah, I mean, so that goes. Yeah, he said if I didn't have this belt on, I'd just look like a quick blur of like a light or something in front of you. And I asked him to take it off, and he said no. And I said why? He said it makes you sick, like kind of getting pushed back into the higher density. It gives you it makes you kind of ill, like your stomach. And anyway,
Right.
going back. Yeah.
Well, that makes sense, and that's really important. So some of these beings, like why they wouldn't just show up, or why you can't just go up there and interact with them, because it's a whole process to get to them, or you need some sort of like a technology. And the the density belt, as we are raising, we're getting there. I'm sure we're starting to be able to see them and interact with them better as we are ascending. But yeah, they've been talking to me about belts too. And I've woken up and I felt like a bracelet on my wrist before. I can't see it, but I've felt it as I woke up. I don't know if it was a memory or what, but I just find that interesting. So, okay. Yeah, you can go ahead and continue.
Yeah. So I got to the quarterdeck and I was, I signed a stack of papers like this much. It was kind of like a mortgage, there was the same petty officer of the watch, and he was flipping the papers for me, and it was already X'd, and initial here, sign here, and I was signing. And as I read it, it was saying strange things. I read the first page, and it said something like, the consciousness of the first party now belongs to the second party, and things like that. And I thought I don't want to sign this. This is bizarre. And I got kind of cold feet, and I said, I don't know if I should be doing this. And he said, you're already back there, so just sign the damn papers. So what he was saying was they actually send you back a couple weeks early for the age regression process. So you come right back to where you started out. So I was already in the underground base, being age regressed when I was signing this paperwork. And I kind of realized I was in a time loop, and it was really weird and
Wow.
strange. Yeah. And I just kind of said, well, I'm doing this for something. I'm doing this for a reason. I'm doing this for Dad. It's kind of like what I said to myself. And I just kept signing. And then he said, all right, sit down. And he got on the phone. And he said, send him in. And a few minutes later, I was kind of daydreaming. And behind that same large window, there was just this huge reptile. And he was 9.5 feet tall. He kind of had to stoop down in this room. And I think this was just a way to get me used to seeing what I would do. And it was dark brown. It had a flat face, gold alligator eyes, a mouth that just kind of went straight across and up. It had ridges going down its head, almost like mohawks going down its head. It was wearing one of those tight blue uniforms. And I said something like, he's not going to eat me, is he? I said, Jesus Christ, he's not going to eat me. I stood right up. And I was ready to run because I'd never seen it. And he said, he's much stronger and faster than you. If he wanted to, he would have killed you and eaten you by now. And when I said that, it heard me it sighed. Its shoulders went up and its shoulders went down. It was not another one of these people. Like he had seen this before, and it kind of aggravated him. And so I stood up and eventually came out of that room and came into the quarterdeck, and I got to see how big it was, and it was just waiting for me. So I got up and I walked with it, and there was like another guard with him this time, like a kid. And I found out later he was an off-world German, and that's what they call them. That's what the military calls them. They call them off-world German, breakaway society. Like Dark Fleet. They're not all Dark Fleet. They have their own world, and they have like a normal life. It's kind of like the 40s. Like they still have like that fashion of like suits and fedora hats and dresses and pillbox hats and things like that. They still have that same kind of like old fashioned on their world. But
So in what year did that happen? Maybe we should explain kind of what that is, or maybe we can finish going through the process and then you explain what that is.
Yeah. And so I walked in the underground base, and immediately we walked up through one of those dark halls. It was just a red line. And I thought, well, wait, these things must see well in the dark. I thought an automatic light would come on or something, and nothing. So I was getting kind of close to it, and it was walking, and this guard kept on like hitting me in the back with the butt of the rifle. I thought maybe because I was looking around, so I stopped looking around, and he kept on hitting me. And I said something like, please stop hitting me. I'm not looking around. And because I didn't realize the situation I was in. I was more like a slave than like military anymore. This guy was just messing with me.
Mm.
And so I thought to myself, if he hits me one more time, I'm going to do something, because he was just hitting me. And he hit me again, and I turned around and I grabbed his weapon and I put my leg behind his, and I just threw him to the ground and knocked the wind out of him. And I held the rifle over his head, and I said, if you hit me with this thing one more time, I'm going to shove it up your ass sideways. And I heard the reptile say, "Leave us," really deep. The way they spoke, it was kind of like the first thing they say was very deep, but then the last syllable they had to kind of push out, like it wasn't natural for them. So he was like, "Leave us." It was kind of like that. And he looked at his weapon, looked at me, looked at his weapon. I just held it out, and he grabbed it and he just walked away. And when I turned around, it was just standing right in front of me, like it was flexing all its muscles and just kind of letting me know like how big it was and didn't want me to be trouble. And I saw like its eyes kind of peering over its chest muscles. And I looked up and I said, about saying about, is he going to eat me? I said, I'm sorry for what I said before. You're much more civilized than him. And then they don't bare their teeth or furrow their brow or anything, because there's really no muscles. They're kind of like reptiles. The only way you can tell they're aggravated is their eyes just get like small. And then his eyes just opened up normal, and he turned around and kept walking. And I was looking around, and we got to like bigger areas. There were bicycles leaning against the wall, like golf carts, things like that. We were gradually walking downhill. And eventually we got to like a catwalk, like 3 steps going up into like what looked like a watertight door, with like the wheel on it and everything. So we walked into this room, and something that looked like a gas chamber chair, and I thought, like, with the sealed door and everything else, and I thought, this is a gas chamber, like this thing's trying to kill me. It was a very big chair, like it was made for one of them. And I found out later that density chambers are reptilian technology, because the XO told me that we have the ability to go up 1 density naturally. Like, so 3rd density beings can go into the 4th, and the 4th is like the astral plane, the spirit world. So we, like, through meditation and things like that, we can go into the astral plane. But reptiles don't. 4th density beings don't have the ability to go from 4th to 5th. And 5th is kind of like where the movers and shakers are in the universe. And so they invented this chair, this technology of a density chamber to push themselves artificially into 5th density, and that's like what it's for. It's for them primarily. So the chair was very large and wide. I didn't want to go in. It grabbed me. It threw me back in the chair. I wound up gouging its eye, because it leaned forward and was growling as it did it. And it kind of made like that alligator mating call noise, where you could feel the vibration of the growl and like in your chest, like the percussion, but you couldn't really like hear it. But then as it got closer, you could hear it. And it said, "Don't make me hit you again," because I was struggling to get out. And then I stuck my thumb in his eye. Anyways, I got strapped in. He was doing something. I don't know. It was like on the side of the wall where the door was. I couldn't tell. Hitting buttons or something. I couldn't tell he was doing something. I was just kind of like freaking out, because I thought it was going to kill me. And before he did it, he looked at me and he said, "I'm sorry, I have to do this to you." And then he left the room and he shut the door. And then it was almost like I felt like immense pressure, and it was almost like an out of body experience. I could astral project like in my mid teens. It was something I worked on a lot, and I could do it. I read it like in a Time Life book about how to do it, and it worked. And it was like, I don't know, weightlessness, cold, and peace is kind of like what it felt like. I could kind of feel myself raising out of my body, like my consciousness is almost what it felt like. And I came to, the straps were off. I actually saw 3 other guys laying on the floor, like on a mattress, and they looked like they picked them up from a club or something. Like they had club clothes on, like they were kidnapped or something. And I saw this first class petty officer. He was a first class petty officer on base, but he was dressed like a Gestapo now, and he
What
had
does that
like
mean?
a Gestapo was like like a German soldier, like the SS in World War II.
Oh,
Yeah, he was dressed like he had like like an undercut with the top of the hair was slicked back, like a 1940s kind of haircut, like slicked back undercut. He was wearing like a leather trench coat with like knee-high boots and stuff like that, like a black leather trench coat, knee-high boots.
okay.
And I could see the reptile's back was towards me. He was kind of gesturing like he was talking, but he wasn't. And I could see this German kind of doing the same thing, and he looked like sorrowful, like mournful for it, or something, pity for it. And I slid out of the chair and I said something, and I was really out of it, woozy, and you don't remember like who you are or what, like you can still reason and everything, but your past is kind of gone. And yeah, I said something like, "Can I go to bed now?" And then I just fell down on like my hands and knees. And then I saw the boots go into my vision, and he said, "I should have you executed for what you did to my man. Do you hear me?" And the reptile said he doesn't remember. It doesn't matter. He doesn't remember. And I just fell over. Then I woke up, and he was carrying me like a duffel bag under his arm. He walked me through the portal. I was placed on like a bed. There was a woman there. She started putting like stickers on me and things like that, like heart monitor things. Like I don't know what it was. Like she started putting things on me. I heard like ripping and tearing. She gave me like a catheter and everything else, and it was just like I was kind of looking around. I didn't know what was going on, and I looked at her and I said, "Can I hold your hand?" And she said, "In a moment." She said, "I'm doing things." And I called her. I said, "You're really pretty." And it was like I was almost like drunk. It was like everything was like new. It was like your color spectrum goes up. Frequency of sound, you can hear more frequency of sound. Your night vision goes up. It's really like it was almost like a high, like I was experiencing like a high, this higher density. It was like a strange feeling.
And so, so you're pushed up into this 5th density through this chamber, and you don't need any technology to like maintain that density.
No, you don't. And I mean,
Interesting.
yeah, you don't need any kind of tech because it just pushes you up. And once you're there, you do go through something called density sickness, which I remember was in the mines of the moon. I was in the mines of the moon at first as punishment for what I did to the reptile. They were going to give me like 20 years, not wipe your memory. They beat you really bad. And it's like a form of punishment. And most people like destroy themselves, as they say, which means like commit suicide or something. It's like a really difficult thing to go through because they don't wipe your brain. And it's something about going from 5th back to 3rd that's really traumatizing to the mind. And that's why another reason why they wipe your mind and everything. But I remember it was like the first 3 weeks when I was in the mines of the moon. You would kind of like everything would get really fast all of a sudden to the point where you couldn't see anything anymore. And voices sounded like chipmunks or really high pitched squeaking, and you couldn't make it out. And all of a sudden you'd come to and somebody was holding your arms and saying, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And you would say, "Yeah." Like, what happened? They said, "Oh, it's just density sickness. It'll wear off." So it's almost like you kind of fall back into 3rd. And it's almost like a relief for your mind because it's so much information to process that it's really intense for like the first few weeks. And then you kind of fall back into 3rd density, and you come back. And it's something, it happens almost every day the first week, and the second week it happens a few times, and then it might happen once the 3rd week, and it's something you gradually just get out of, and they call it density sickness.
Wow.
Yeah, and I saw somebody it happened to, And he looked almost like a mannequin. He just froze, and then somebody else had to hold him, like, make sure he doesn't fall. And I was holding him, and I just did an experiment. I like grabbed his wrist and started moving it. And he said, "Don't do that. You're much too fast for him." And I was like, "Oh, you think you could hurt him?" I was like, "Oh, I
Wow.
didn't know." But yeah, that they call that density sickness. But yeah, it was like this woman named April that worked on the base. She was an IT, like computer tech. But I guess she volunteered for the program too. She was a nurse on the moon. And I woke up the next day, and
So you recognized April from Earth.
I didn't recognize her, but Robert told me about her. I was like, because when my memories were first coming back, I was like, I remember like a woman, like, I remember the beginning and I remember the end, but everything in the middle was like a blank. And he said that was April.
Okay.
And yeah.
So it was, just to clarify, it was somebody who had, well, you'd said that, volunteered for the program. You just didn't know exactly who it was until after you or until Robert told you your
Yeah,
Excel.
yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I really didn't have any memories until he told me a lot of stuff. But
And it kind of triggered some stuff to start coming back afterwards.
exactly. And yeah, like I was by myself the next day. I just woke up in a room by myself, and I was kind of looking around. Everything was new, like I said. I was kind of like a little kid looking around. Everything was like, it was like being reborn almost. It felt like going into a higher density. And she walks in, she puts her bag down, and then she brings out like a smart glass pad, which is like those clear pads. It's what the smartphone's based off of. Robert told me you could tell it's starting. One of the first ET techs you're going to see is a smartphone, which is based off the smart glass pad. It's basically what he told me. And it's like a clear pad, and she was able to kind of like, you would see images like of a humanoid, and she was able to kind of grab it and pull it out, and it was like a hologram, and she could stick her finger in it and move it around. And it was like a humanoid body with a circulatory system. It was almost like she was giving me a physical. She could put her hand in and open it up. You could see the heart, the brain, everything like that. She was making sure everything was all right. And, she was just giving me like a physical, like all throughout the day. And I was talking to her and getting to know her and things like that. And she said, "All right, I'll be back tomorrow." And she went to leave. And I said, "You're going to leave? Are you going to leave me in here again?" And she said, "Yeah, I'll be back tomorrow. Don't worry." And I just stood in front of her and like grabbed her hand. And I said, "I don't know what to do or say, but I don't want you to leave me." And she liked that. She smiled and she just took me out. Like we walked out of this room. And it was almost like we were in a courtyard of a condominium. And there was like trains behind us. You could see, and it looked like changing of shifts. There were like men walking with like gray uniforms on, and they were moving to the trains. And there was like 5 or 6 levels on this condo. It was like, it felt like we were in a courtyard of a condo. There were all these walkways, and it was like 5 or 6 floors up. And there were women with babies like waving, and the men were waving by. And there were these 4 lifts in the middle of this courtyard. And she took me to one of these lifts, and there was no railing or anything like that. And it just went straight up and went straight to her room. And I remember there was a woman on the sidewalk, and there was no railings on these sidewalks. And I said, she was holding a baby, and I said, "Aren't you afraid you're going to fall off?" And she said, "Oh, no, you can't fall off." And she just stepped off. And she said, "There's an invisible field on every level." And I said, "How far does it go?" She goes, "All the way to the other end." She said, "The kids play on it. They're not supposed to, but they do." So it was like it was impossible to fall off the lift or fall off any of these floors.
And just to clarify, so this is on the moon.
This is inside the moon. Yeah, this was like a
inside
mine inside the moon.
Okay, very fascinating.
And I didn't really. She told me we're in the moon, and she kind of gave me extra details. It was, because we were talking all throughout the day. It was really bizarre, yeah. And she took me to her room, and it's kind of like they want you to be like this. It's like the reason why they have like the brothels in the moon and stuff is because they discovered that men are more productive if they have sex readily available to them and things like that. So it's like a way to get you to become more productive. So, and that's like, and they take the offspring and they use them for, either going into the programs if their IQs are high enough, or they use them, they put them back into the caverns in the earth if they're not. They harvest them, I guess is what I'll say. But yeah, and that's kind of like what it's for. It's like a breeding program almost, like in the mines of the moon. And
that's what I was seeing just the other day on whenever I did my last Alliance updates. It was on the California fires, but I got other information too. Or maybe it was the 2025 year of prophecy. Yeah, I was just seeing basically like a farm literally a farm, a human farm, a human farm that's been set up. I mean, we're clearing it out, but that's what's been happening on this planet and I guess on the moon for a very long time.
And that's a big part of it, and that's what a lot of these bases are for. I was told the two main things is like trafficking, basically trafficking in the space program, and harvesting of children. That's like the two main reasons why these underground bases exist. And it doesn't matter what country it's in; it's all owned by the reptiles. Because they own the underground. That's part of the contract and the stalemate, the war we got into them with a long time ago. And I think that's kind of like what the War of the Gods, like in the Hindu text. That's kind of like what that reminds me of. You hear about the War of the Gods in the old Hindu texts and things like that. But
maybe we can touch on this for a second first for some who may not know. So do you think this so you said it was like off-world, like Germans, and they're in these German uniforms. Is that what you were seeing on the moon too?
Well, yeah, there were Germans and there were reptiles. Yeah, you were pretty much being bossed around by Germans, like guys dressed up in SS uniforms is pretty much what they look like. Like, the black leather trench coats and everything.
So then do you think this goes back to, from my understanding, there was like a treaty made during like Eisenhower's presidency back in, what was that, the 40s? Between, well, he was approached by positive ETs and negative ETs, and then without his knowing, we'll say the cabal or deep state made a deal with the negative ETs in exchange for tech, like negative reptilians and all of that, and then like these Germans like use this tech to create off-world colonies. Is that kind of what? Do you have anything to add to that, or what would you say to that?
That's exactly it. I mean, because I asked the executive officer, Robert. I said, "Why do you deal with these things?" And he said, "We have a contract, and the contract is, they give us so much technology, but in exchange, we have to give them so many people, like every year in exchange." And that's
and that's where all the abductions are coming from. All of this whole deal it literally was a contracted deal.
Yeah, and ETs are very big on contracts. You have to fulfill your contract. It has to do something with the balance of the universe, things like that. It's just like you always have to fulfill a contract. It's a very important thing. But yeah, it was like, and the same thing happened to Germany. Positive came first, and they only offered them certain things, and Germany didn't want it at the time. So then the negative beings came, and it sounds like, and as far as what I know, we lost World War II. Like we don't realize we lost it, but we did. And it was just like Germany actually won World War II, but it was more in like a kind of infiltration way. The Project Paperclip went a lot deeper than we thought. It was like a lot deeper. The whole thing where we were hiring Nazi scientists to get us to the moon and everything like that for rocketry. It was called Project Paperclip, and it went a lot deeper than like anybody realizes. And yeah, so this woman, April, she took me into the room, and it was very Spartan. It was just like a table and a couch, like a coffee table, and like a bar area, a kitchen area, like a bedroom. And she took me into the bedroom, and we just started to kiss. And she said, "Wait, what's your name?" And I said, "I don't remember." She goes, "Come on, think. Everybody remembers their name." And I said, "Daryl." And then we wound up, having sex, and I was just leaning against the headboard, and she was leaning on my chest, and I just kind of dozed off, and I woke back up, and I was back in England. Like that's how it happened to me. Like that's how it felt to me. Like, and I remember I was like I was with a woman. Like, what happened? I like opened my blinds in the window, and I was looking out, and I was like, what was that? Like, and it was real. It wasn't like, this could have happened. This was like real.
Yeah.
And yeah, I wound up all these strange situations on the base. As soon as I walked out of my room, well, when I woke up, I was very toned. I woke up with my t-shirt on still, my black socks on still, and my uniform kind of laid out on a chair in front of me, which was very strange. Like, and I missed Saturday. I woke up on a Sunday. I was very muscular. I ran my fingers through my hair and I had burnt stubble. I ran it through my chest hair and I had burnt stubble, and I couldn't figure out what was happening. And I walked out of my room. There was a guy waiting for me, and he said, "Congratulations, you made it back." And I said, "What?" And he said, 20 years is a long time. A lot of people don't make it back. and I didn't know what he was talking about. And I don't know. Do you have any? That's kind of like how I got back. Do you have any further questions, or would you like to go to a different topic?
Well, we might have to end up doing a part 2 for this.
Yeah, yeah. It's up to you. It usually does take 2 parts. I mean, and then there was like, the base itself revealed a lot. Like this isn't like, something I made up just because of all the what happened interactions with people on the base. And I went to the bar on base, and there was always these same crowd of people. There was guys who sat at the bar, and there was like this one that sat down at a table watching TV, and he had a shaved head and he was big. And I call him the goon. Like I don't remember their names. I really didn't like them, and they were all British Army, and I really didn't like any of them because they kind of were like jerks. Like they didn't like.
And just to clarify, so this is after you came back, after your
Yeah.
So essentially, for anybody who might be confused, but also we're kind of walking through it in your shoes because at the time you're like, what the hell just happened to me? What's happening? But so basically you signed into this program, you were taken to this program, and you went to the moon. You were supposed to go for a more positive program, from my understanding, but then something happened between you and that reptilian where they kind of punished you and put you into this darker program on the moon. We can get into more details on that in maybe in a minute or in part 2. And then now your memory's kind of like wiped and you're back where you started. And you're like, what just happened?
Okay. And the way it was explained to me, like whenever I was talking to the XO, he was just, he told me he wanted me to play guitar again because I hadn't played guitar in a long time. He's like, I want you to play classical guitar again. Was one of the things he told me. And I said, I haven't played classical guitar in years. And he said, Daryl, you're still playing it. Like he was kind of letting me know, like there's like 2 of you, like sharing a consciousness. There can only be one consciousness at a time in the universe. But the consciousness, the soul is close to God. If God is omnipresent, then the consciousness is omnipresent. So it's almost like you're sharing the same consciousness. And that's why it's difficult for people until they come back, why it's hard.
I just heard that. Oh my gosh, that's so weird. I just heard those exact words yesterday in my mind telepathically. You are sharing a consciousness.
Yeah. So that's how time travel works. So like the more that there are of you at that moment in time in the universe, it's like the more it wears on you because you're kind of like it's almost like your soul is getting thinner and thinner. Like you're kind of sharing the same consciousness with this same soul. But so if you have several of you at once in this one time period, it's like it gets more difficult. But then if you go further in time, then it gets easier again. I don't know. Yeah, it's like you're sharing a consciousness.
Have you ever? Sorry, go ahead.
No, you just have to kind of think of it like that. Like you're still there. Like he said that to me. Like you're still there. It's like you, like the you I'm talking to right now, because I'm talking to your soul. I'm not talking to your flesh and blood. Like I'm talking to your consciousness. So it's like you have to get that in your head. Like it's not flesh and bone. It's not flesh and blood. It's like the soul that's inside you is there right now. That's kind of how I put it.
Yeah. So there's kind of like a diagram that you could draw. I've seen Tony Rodriguez draw this and it kind of helps. It's like you've got you on, this 3D physical, your physical body. And then there's this other you, your consciousness put into another body, we'll say, or maybe it's not put into another body. Is it put into another body?
No, it's 2 bodies, but it's just it's not really you don't think of it as the body. Yeah, it's just that the soul is kind of being split by 2 bodies at once.
Okay.
Kind of being pulled, or it's not really being split or pulled. It's just the soul kind of bypasses time and space. You know what I mean? It's omnipresent. It can be at more places than one.
Right. So it's living out this 20-year program, doing this other stuff while you're still, like here's the 20-year program, and then here's you on Earth. And this one is like bypassing time. And then you kind of get put back there. But really, those things are still happening at the same time as they're being played out. So have you ever tried, tapping into what this other you is doing at this other time? Does that make sense?
I mean, kind of, and I think it may work, but the way it was explained to me is you're going to remember it in real time, is what he said. He said you're going to get your memories back in real time. So it's like the time that I'm up there, the time I'm here, we're kind of sharing memories in a sense that every day isn't necessarily a memory. Days can be kind of mundane up there, just like here, but major events, it's almost like a flash of memory will come to me as the me up there makes memories down here. And that's how it was explained to me. You're going to remember in real time, like you're going to know different. So I can't see my future in the timeline or in the space program, but I could just every now and again I catch a glimpse of what he's doing right here, right now, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So yeah, and until you get out of that time loop, basically, you're really not whole. You're not complete. It's kind of like how it was explained to me.
Right. And I think that's part of why soul retrieval has been a big thing. Kind of these fragmented parts can happen during trauma too, where you lose parts of your soul essence. And then you've got the programs, those of us who have been in these programs as well. There's kind of like these like fragments that we're kind of collecting and becoming more whole. And sometimes whenever these fragments come back, there's trauma that needs to be healed with that. Or you may even get some bad memories or whatever that comes with that. So that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. And so I mean, I was just on the base and I went to the bar and I went inside the bar and that guy, the goon, he just goes, "Hey, it's the king of the Titans. What's up, man?" And he's like, "Aquino screwed you up." He said he had me like smashing your toes and he's explaining like this torture that I went through or something. And I had no idea what he was talking about. Yeah. And it was strange. I was always lured back to this bar because sometimes he would get drunk and he would tell me things like about a life I didn't know I had, or he would say things like he knew about my past.
Mm-hmm.
He would he knew friends, names of friends of mine and things like that, and different traumatic events in my childhood. And he would say like Aquino did that to you. He just wanted me to let you know that. Like he was just, but he knew stuff that it wasn't just like my mother's maiden name. He knew like a lot of strange things that I didn't know about. But then he would talk about different people I knew, and he said I named out all these crazy names, and I was speaking very strangely. And Aquino explained to him that that's the way like Taigetans speak when they speak aloud. They don't use they kind of pause in between every word as they're speaking. It's like a different way of speaking. And yeah, I don't know. He was just explaining this to me.
Mm-hmm.
And he would say strange things to me. I asked him what a Taigetan was, and he said, "Have you ever heard of Billy Meyer?" And I said, "No." And he's like, "Well, like the Pleiadians and things like that." He said you should look them up.
Mm-hmm.
So I looked up Billy Meyer, and I that was 2004, so Billy Meyer was still kind of big back then. I was looking at it, and it was just very strange in this bar. I remember he said that he got to meet Tom Cruise the other day. And the guys on base were all saying, Tom Cruise, they allowed him in the underground base. And I said, why? They said, I don't know. And I figured it was just maybe for a movie role, because I know they do that sometimes. They allow celebrities in like nuclear subs and top secret things to film movies, like propaganda pretty much for the military. And he said that, he bought that drug off of him. And he said he was like the main distributor for the Scientologists. And he explained to me like what it was and things like that.
Could you explain? We're on YouTube, but could you let people know what you're talking about?
Okay, well, I mean, Robert went into great detail in the office. I'm kind of jumping back and forth in the story, but I had a memory when I was talking to him in the office where I kept on seeing kids in cages, like in dog kennels, and they were kind of stacked up on top of each other. I don't know, 5 high by about 5 wide. And they were very white. They were like white as a sheet, and their eyes were very dilated, and their hair was very matted, and they were naked, and they looked like they had never been cleaned before. And I remember being drugged, and this girl came up and like slammed her hands on the front of the cage. And one of these other Satanists, there were Satanists on the bar. The people in the bar, they were all Satanists. There was this other woman who was U.S. Navy. She was a Satanist, and they all joined the program, except for they just stayed on Earth, and they just did this adrenochrome harvesting is what it is. And Robert explained to me that they run electrical current through these cages, which shocks the kids, causes the adrenochrome to kick in. They take them out, strap them to a table, and they give them almost like a spinal tap near the base, like the top vertebrae of the skull, and they draw it out. And he said that they take a pint or two at a time. And I don't know, this gets kind of dark. but he said that I said a pint or two. Some of those kids were toddlers that would kill them, and he said it does. He said that
Wow.
they put them in something that looks like a wood chipper and they feed them to the other children. So it's like forced cannibalism, like that's how they eat. He said when they start showing, if they do live and they start showing signs of puberty, they slit their throats and they put them in this chipper. He said that it prolongs life, and the
drug.
adrenaline is kind of like the icing on the cake. It gives you like a really strong euphoric high. But he said it can also do things like it could turn someone who's not a telepath into like telepathic for the moment when they're still high on this drug. They become telepathic. They can look at timelines. They become psychic. Things like that. It enhances certain parts, certain features of people. And yeah, he asked me if I've ever seen the movie Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, and I said, yeah. Remember the Adrenochrome scene? I said, yeah. He's like, that's where they get it from, and that's how he kind of explained it to me. And yeah,
And you didn't know about this. You had never heard of this before from any other source besides whenever you were on the base learning about this, right?
yeah. I mean, I'd seen the movie Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, and I thought that was a dark scene. And I remember I said, he said he got it from a Satanist, and he's like, yeah, Satanists deal in it. They sell this drug, and it's extremely expensive. And they try to inject it because it's a better high. But if you're not the proper blood type, then you can't. So then they just drink it. And because it's so rare and it's so expensive, sometimes you just have to drink it. But other times, you inject it. And he told me, you're going to see celebrities, they're going to age dramatically, which has kind of happened to Tom Cruise from the last, Top Gun movie that he was in. You can kind of see he actually got plastic surgery done. And he said, how do you think celebrities stay young for so long? Like plastic surgery alone? And I said, I never really thought about it. And he said, nobody does. And then he kind of explained to me that that's where the mythical vampire comes from. And if they don't get their fix, and they need it once a week. And if they don't get it in once a week, they go through terrible withdrawals by the second week. And then he said by the third week, if they've been doing it for 15 years, they'll age like 30 years, like in 3 weeks, like in the final withdrawal period. And he said it's extremely painful. Your body doesn't create stem cells anymore. It's kind of like taking steroids. Your body doesn't produce testosterone anymore, but it's more life threatening. And
So
yeah,
it's like once you're on it, like you need to stay on it.
Exactly. Like you have to do it for life. Like once it's like a vampire, like once you do it, you have to keep doing it. And
Wow.
he referred to it. If they stop doing it, they turn into ghouls. Is how he said. They just age dramatically, like almost overnight. They just age really quickly, and they usually die from the withdrawal. It kills like 90% of the people or so. Like most don't live. But he said they would sell a synthetic he told me about this goes further on his story, but I'll just hopefully I'll get back to that later. And yeah, so all these events were happening on the base. One time the guys in the bar were very talking quick. I didn't understand what was happening. They were in a circle. And I mean, they were talking like faster than any human being could talk. It was very strange, weird. And I said, what's wrong with you guys? Are you on cocaine? And they said, no, we're on chrome, man. They called it chrome. I said, what's chrome? Adrenochrome. You get it from kids. Because when he would tell me things, it would kind of go in one ear out the other because I thought he was messing with me. And then when I asked him, I was like, well, if you do all these things, why aren't you arrested? And he said, we own this space. He was basically saying like the Satanists own this space.
Wow.
And and I mean, that goes into like the negative aspect of the earth. It's Satanist. It's like the duality of the earth. Like all worlds have a duality. It's like Satanist is the negative duality of the earth. Saturn, Saturn worship, things like that. And so,
and I've been getting messages recently where there's like treaties, contracts are ending, is what I heard. Contracts are ending. So we were talking about contracts a minute ago about how they're very big on contracts. The universe is really big on contracts, and these entities, these galactics and humans, all about contracts. And so yeah, I feel it's good that we're exposing this, and thank you for sharing this. People need to know. And further along in your story, it goes back to like what some of these positive programs are doing, like in what you said in the beginning, going back and rescuing out these children and clearing out these deep underground bases and all of that. So that's happening too. But we need to know also like what's been going on under there. People need to know that. But yeah, I think like these contracts are ending and that's starting to go away. I just wanted to add that. But
yeah, I mean, and as far as I was told by him, I mean, it eventually leads up to that. I remember just something I don't talk about a lot, but it happened. It was that same person that said, you know, congratulations, you made it back. 20 years is a long time. A lot of people don't make it back. He was kind of like a jerk, and but he invited me into his room one day, and he was going to leave the command in 2 or 3 days, and he invited me into his room, and he said, sit down. And I sat down, and he said, you joined something called the Secret Space Program. He said, you don't remember that? And I said, no. And he said, Aquino tortured you for 2 days, and everybody who works in the underground base who acts like they're your friend, they all know it. And he said, doesn't that piss you off that all these people know this happened to you, but they don't bother saying anything to you? And I said, well, I don't remember. He said, the guys that you work with in the garage, they have no idea, you know, but he was just kind of letting me know, like, this happened. And that's what I'm saying. Like, all these events that happen on the base, like these discussions, these conversations I had with people, it was just, and at the time, I really didn't know what to think of it.
yeah.
And he was just kind of like letting me know, like, hey, this happened to you know, like, this is real and this happened to you. And I said, well, did you join the program? And he said, no. He said, I was offered, but I didn't. And it almost seemed like there were guys who joined and guys who didn't. And the guys who didn't join kind of spied on the people that did join to see if their memories were coming back, to see if there's any kind of sign that their memories were coming back. So a lot of people who were acting like they were my friends, they really weren't my friends. They were just kind of spying on me because the command was telling them to see if I had any memories coming back or anything like that.
Wow.
And yeah, so it was very deceptive. And I lost like a lot of hope in humanity when I heard about this for like a long time. I'm getting it back, but it was just like all these people I thought were my friends were just like spies. Like this whole base was just filled with spies, and I was completely unaware. It was strange. Wow. And so eventually I got to a point where I was getting out of the command. I was like, my drinking was going up. There was something wrong with me. I was having nightmares. I didn't know why. I had depression the first time in my life. I never had depression, like really horrible depression. I kept on having dreams of like right before you wake up, like those kind of dreams. You know, right before you wake up, you have this dream, and it was just blonde-haired, blue-eyed people like looking at me, like staring at. They didn't say anything. It was just like a group of them. Some were like standing up like sideways and had their head turned, like looking at me. And it was just all these like a group of people just kind of looking at me, and I didn't know what it meant. And yeah, so I was getting out of the command. Well, something else that happened that was strange was the XO came up during the 4th of July party. If we're going to do a part 2, I was kind of skipping a little thing.
Yeah, I think we should do a part 2, but let's do what we can to kind of like make this like a little bit full circle, or leave it on a cliffhanger too, and then we'll do a part 2.
Okay, but this was like a strange event. We were at the 4th of July party, and we got like the CBs got hot dogs and hamburgers. We were grilling the hot dogs and hamburgers. So I was like kind of, you know, putting hot dogs in buns and passing them out to people and everything. And the XO came up to me and he goes, Petty Officer James, I'd like you to introduce you to my daughter. And I was like, what the heck? And I was talking to her, and, you know, I introduced myself. I asked her where she was from, blah, blah, blah. We kind of had a line going. So, and then I asked her, you know, would you like to, you know, do something this weekend? And she's like, no, I don't think so. And then she just walked on. And then the XO came up to me and he said, Petty Officer James, do you play guitar? And I said, I used to, sir. And he's like, you should think about taking that back up. And then he just like, I think he asked me if I like Westerns too. And I was like, yeah. And he was asking me like all these, it was like he knew stuff about me, and I didn't know why, but it was just like this bizarre situation. And yeah, so that was like another strange thing. And so I eventually, you know, was getting out of the Navy for good. And I saw you get to see the Master Chief of the base, the executive officer, and the commanding officer. It's kind of like this thing they do in the military where you could say anything you want to them. You can't break the law, like you can't threaten them, but you can call them a jerk or whatever, and this is a horrible command, and I, you know, blah, blah, blah. It's just like this thing that you do in the Navy. And I saw the Master Chief, who was like an overweight guy with glasses, didn't say much to him. And then I saw the XO, and I walked in the XO's office.
And this is Robert?
This was Robert, yeah.
Okay.
And he stood up really slow, and he looked sad. And then he just appeared at the end of his desk. Like, I mean, like that. Like, in my head, I thought that I had just have a stroke. Like, it was strange. And then he put his hand down on the table really slow, and then he just appeared right in front of me. And I took a step back, and he took a step forward. And he, like, in my head, I heard, "Can you hear what I'm saying to you?" And it's something that like ETs do, or fifth density beings. They want a physical acknowledgement. They want you to know that this isn't just a voice in your head, that this is real. So in my head, I said yes, but then he said it again. "Can you hear what I'm saying to you?" And I nodded my head, and under my breath, I said yes. He said, "What do you remember?" And I said, "I remember a woman. She was tall. She was sitting down. She had long silver hair, big cheekbones, big blue eyes. She had a boy sitting on her lap. I kissed the boy on the head, and then I kissed her." And he said, "That was mother. You had a son with her." And I said, "I have a son." And he said, "You have dozens of sons and hundreds of daughters." And I said, "What?" And then he just started explaining all this stuff, like strange things to me. Like, I was in this program. I wasn't put properly down in the fifth density. I'm still partially in fifth. You still have your memories. Something went wrong. You don't understand. He kept on saying, "This is going to destroy you. This is going to destroy you." And I said, "What do you mean? Am I going to blow up?" And he said, "No." He said, "Most people who have memories of the 20-year back commit suicide in the first 6 months." He's like, "You don't know how much danger you're in." He was just trying to explain to me, like, what kind of, danger I truly was in. And I don't know. Well, I said, they're the ones, because I remember them. I remember these beings. It was always like a part of me. I saw them in my dreams and things like that. And I said, "They're the ones that they call the Pleiadians, right?" And he said, "We call them Nordics." And I said, "What do they call themselves?" And he said, "Tagetes." And that's when he told me that. And then he explained, like, I had many wives. He said they were polygamous. Like the ratio of women to men was like 30-1 roundabout. There was a lot more women than men, and that was like how their society was. Yeah, and it was just, he said you had many wives, but the one you loved the most was Swaru, is how would he call her. And then it was just very strange. And but as he was telling me things, more and more memories were coming back. He was just kind of unlocking things. He was like, everything he told me, he unlocked more. And it was almost like something in the back of my mind where it was like, how could I have ever forgotten about this? That's almost like how it felt when he told me things. Like a rush of memories came back every time he told me more and more things. And he got to a point where he realized I wasn't going back. It was kind of like that. It was, "I don't trust you. I'm not going back." It's kind of like how I put it. And so he started looking down my timeline. He's like looking around. I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm looking down your timeline." And he got to a point where he said, "Well, you make it." Like, he wanted to make sure I didn't hurt myself or kill myself or anything like that. And then he would go further and further down. And he got to a point where he looked at me and he said, "You think I look like Mike Pence? You're right." And I said, "Who's Mike Pence?" And he said, "He becomes the vice president of Trump." And I said, "Trump becomes president?" And he goes, I said, "The billionaire?" And he goes, "Yes." And then he said that Mike Pence comes from his timeline, but he's no good. He said he's trying to stop my mission. And he explained to me that he came from the year 2580. He said that his people and his timeline, their hair begins to salt and pepper at 50, turns pure white by 60, their eyebrows turn pure white by 70. He kind of had that turned up needle nose like Mike Pence. He had that constant scowl. I even said something like, "Do they all have that constant scowl like you?" And he said, "Yes." And he said their average life expectancy is 110. And then he explained to me that he had to go back in time to change the timelines, like he was genetically augmented in the womb, to be very telepathic, to be very psychic, and to just go on with his mission. Like, he had to get some of his feelings taken away. Or he was more like, I wouldn't say robotic, but just like almost like a samurai with his mission. Like, his mission was it. Like, that was his goal. Nothing
You're
else
talking
mattered.
about Robert, your XO.
Yeah, Robert the XO. Yeah. Like,
who was wearing the density belt.
Yeah, he explained the densities and all this other stuff. I mean, we were talking for about an hour and a half, I'd say, in this office. And Yeah, and he said that when Hillary Clinton won the election, that
In his timeline.
in his original timeline, yeah, before they changed it, and immigration became way worse. And then her second election, he would say things, like my ancestors were, openly raped and murdered, and the police did nothing. And if we tried to fight back, we were the ones that were thrown in prison. And he said that on our second election, we got into a nuclear war with China that was intended to be lost because of the Second Amendment. China felt that the United States would take like 9 or 10 years to conquer, and they didn't want it to take that long, so they just leveled us with nuclear weapons. And America fell, and then it went into like 100-year breeding programs. He said they sent people from other countries all together, and they force bred them all together. And then they took the lighter skinned people, and then they put them in Asia, and they force bred them for 100 years. And then they all kind of were at peace. And then they realized that they made a mistake, and there was a gene that they tried to extract. And that's like what they did another 100-year breeding program to try to extract this gene. And that's what created like the Mike Pence people. Like that's why they all look similar. And he said, you're going to notice his daughters all have black hair. His son has black hair. Even the one with blonde hair, she kind of has like that weird orangish kind of blonde hair. Like you can tell it's black, but it's not. And he's like, he explained this to me, these breeding programs. And
well, I was going to say that kind of reminds me of, so like you hear about like the Greys, some of these Greys could potentially be one of the theories as them being us from the future, or being at least maybe not us specifically, but being from the future. And through they made a mistake, and that's why a lot of them are coming back genetically and creating hybrid programs with us humans, because they kind of like they're at the end of their rope and with their genetics, and they made a mistake. So that's interesting that your XO said that he was from the future, from an alternate timeline where Hillary Clinton won, and then there's like this breeding program. Essentially, something similar happens with the genetics of humanity, and it's like a mistake. That's really interesting.
And yeah, and he said we couldn't make it past fifth density, and if a world doesn't keep evolving, it dies. And I asked him to explain to me, what do you mean it dies? And he said, the rivers dry up, the lakes dry up, the fields die, the crops die. And he was just like, they were on like, their last legs. And they tried other ways of doing it, but they realized they just had to go back in time and kind of erase that timeline. And I said, is your mission successful? And he said, yes. And I said, well, what about your parents? And he said, my mother's gone, my father's gone, my brothers and sisters are gone, all my friends are gone. And I said, well, what are you doing here? Still. And he said, I don't know. Like, he didn't know why he was still, he said he went forward in time and everything, and the mission was successful, but for some reason he was still here, and he had no idea why. And yeah, there was just, he went on about that, and he went on about
I want to ask, so I remember Tyler talking about this, but there were some other people that if you want to talk about this in Florida, in the state you are, or you've ran into other people these times. Do you want to talk about that publicly?
Yeah, I can talk about it. Yeah, well, I was just in the gym at the VA, the Veterans Association, and I was just working out at the gym. And there was a guy, yeah, he's my neighbor. I mean, not my neighbor, but he's in my neighborhood. And somebody came up to him, just another person at the gym, and he goes, hey, you're from the future, right? And this guy was really amazed, and he said, yeah, how did you know that? And he said, I used to work with you guys. Like, when I was in the military, I met you guys. I used to work with you guys. And yeah, he has the same thing, black hair, kind of the scowl, white, his hair's white. He's probably in his 70s by now. His eyebrows are starting to turn white. I remember one time I didn't say anything to him. Like, I never said anything. I just didn't feel like it's my place. But he invited me. I got to talking to him, and he invited me to go to IHOP on Veterans Day to get like a free breakfast or whatever. And it was during the whole Hillary Clinton fiasco with Trump and everything like that. Or no, it was the Joe Biden one? That's what it was. You know, when the election was just taking like weeks to count all the votes and everything like that. And I said, this is blatant voter fraud, like blatant voter fraud. And he kind of stared off in the distance and said, don't say that. You don't know what that means. Like, he looked like really terrified if like Trump was to win. Like it was like almost like, I don't know, maybe he was afraid that his timeline would end. But yeah, Robert knew that I would meet this guy. He was able to he called it branching off on other people's timelines. He was able to go down my timeline, and people I actually met, he would be able to branch off onto their timeline. And he told me that his brother worked for a corporation that had time travel capabilities, and they realized their timeline was collapsing. So they went back in time into our time to like save themselves. That's what he told me. Because like as he was going down my timeline, he could see all the things that I could see, all the memories I have. Almost like he was living my life. You know, kind of like what it felt like. And yeah, I mean, he realized I wasn't going to go back. So he said, you know, things are going to be so much better compared to like what my time was. And he told me.
So they like jumped ship. So they basically like jumped ship because that timeline was going to be really bad. Their timeline was going to be non-existent, but for some reason, I don't know. It's almost like they were protected by the fold of our time. I don't know like how that works. Like for some reason, he just said it collapsed. Like some people say that they stay as like alternate universes or something or alternates, but he said no, it just collapsed. And he talked about, I was just going to confirm that. So I've been getting a lot of messages about timelines, and I've covered that over the last like month or so in my live streams and messages that I've been getting. But that's kind of what I've seen. Like some of them kind of merging with ours, some of them splitting off, and then some of them kind of like maybe like these time bubbles, and they just kind of like pop, and they are just gone. Like they literally disappear. But then there's others that merge and others that split. It's kind of hard to explain, but I've seen that where some just literally they just fizzle out and then they just disappear.
And he explained that too to me. He said that there are multiple timelines, but then there's major events where they become convergence points, where they all come back together and then they'll split again. And that's kind of like the way he explained like timelines to me. It's like, yes, they do branch off, but then you have major events that are like convergence points where they all become one again and then they split off again.
Okay.
And I don't know. He said that there's a corporation called Kruger that's helping us with this, and it's in Germany from an alternate universe. There's eight different universes we know of, and this corporation they worked immediately. They got help from the positive beings, like the Pleiadians, the Tigetans. They immediately decided to take help from the positive beings during World War II. And I guess they worked together and they created this ability to go into different universes. And they're the only ones that we know of besides the AI. And that's kind of like what we're fighting against, because the AI is in the Draconian Empire. All the reptiles have like this AI hive mind consciousness. But the AI is in like a separate universe. So that's why it's so hard to combat. So like Kruger's mission is to kind of like go back, get as many universes on the same page, or just go into different universes, get them all on the same page, and then eventually kind of like team up together and attack like this AI. That's kind of like what their future mission is what they're trying to do.
Wow.
And he said that Kruger has like the ability to kind of, if you're fighting a war, they can go back in time and they can say, okay, we need more supplies here, we need more men there. They can rerun the battle. If they lose that battle, they can just keep on rerunning it as many times as they have to until they're just basically unbeatable. Like they have this technology to be able to do that.
And they're fighting for the good?
And they're fighting for the good, yeah. Like they're trying to align all the Earths together on the same page to eventually fight this AI. And yeah, and they're the ones that are actually stepping in and rearranging the timeline so we don't most likely go to war. And yeah, wow. He realized I wasn't going back, so he kind of was just like, okay, I can see down your timeline, you're not going back. You know, you've made the choice not to go back, so I'm going to start telling you things. And he just started telling me all this stuff about this life I had. He told me all these events about the future. He said that
maybe we can go into some of the events in the future, and then on part 2, we can dive more into your Tigetan experiences.
Of course, yeah. That's where I usually end it. I usually end it where Robert told me all these different things.
Okay, beautiful, perfect. That's fantastic.
Well, when he brought up the Adrenochrome thing, he said, "Have you ever heard of the song Little Ghost by the White Stripes?" I said, "Yes." And he said, Jack White is the main distributor for the music industry. And that song Little Ghost is about the pure white, children, the ghostly children that live in these kennels, these dog kennels in these underground bases. Little Ghost, the one I fear the most. He fears that people will know what he's up to. Can you scare me up some love? Scare like adrenaline, love, drug, the adrenochrome. But because of my condition, his condition is if he stops doing this drug, he'll die. So that whole song is about the kids in the underground bases, that Little Ghost. And then he said that Tom Hanks was the kingpin, kind of, sort of the adrenochrome sales. And he said, we get him in Australia. He said, there's going to be like a flu. Everybody's going to become afraid of the flu, like the pandemic thing.
And this was back in 2004.
2004, yeah. And so they caught Tom Hanks in Australia, him and his wife, whenever they were acting like they were on TV and they were talking and telling everybody how great it is and you should get your vaccines. He said that he told me about deepfake, like they could digitally kind of put your face on someone else's. He says it's his brother. He says his brother sounds just like him. He actually did the voice for the toy Woody when you pull the string on the actual toy in the movie Toy Story, and to get extra royalties. And so he's gonna be this is his brother the whole time. He says his last movie was that Apple TV movie where he was in the Navy, where he was like a captain in the Navy. So the Elvis movie, the reason they put a fat suit on him was because it was actually his brother, but his brother sounds just like him. And he said that, they catch him. All the celebrities are in on it. All the politicians. It's worse than you think. Everybody who you thought were your heroes are in on this thing. And then he said that they approached. He said, the guys from South Park, and I said, yeah. He said, you remember when they went to the Oscars? I said, yeah, they went in drag and they were on acid. And he said, you know why they did that? And I said, no. He said, because they hate them. And I said, who? And he said, Hollywood. They hate them. And I said, why? He said, because they're scum. And he said that the South Park episode where the K was spelt with a Q, he said that was the military actually approached them and kind of gave them a script that said, like, you can write jokes on the side, but we want you to follow this main plot. And he said that they called that soft disclosure, kind of like a way to plant a seed into the people's subconscious so it's easier to take when they realize the truth, is how he put it.
Yeah. And you said there was one episode where instead of a K, they put a Q?
They could put a Q as in Q. And he said Q was real. And he said it was like military personnel all working together. He said this was their third attempt. He said nobody liked George Bush Sr., and that's when they all started coming together. And he told me there's going to be a coup, is how he put it. He said, Daryl, there's going to be a coup. And I said, well, coups are bad. Like, what side should I be on? He's like, no, you're going to want this coup. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, Daryl, they start castrating children. And I said, like, no way. I was like, people aren't going to accept that. And he told me about the transgender movement. And he said that was kind of like where the military really put it into, like, top gear to like get this going, get this accelerated. Like they were completely against that. But yeah, he said they didn't like George Bush Sr. They hated the Clintons. And he said that the reason why the Clintons go to Haiti every year is because Hillary Clinton is a high-ranking voodoo priestess, and her master lives in Haiti. And he said that Bill's not as guilty as her, but he knows what she does, so he's just as guilty. And he told me about, I'm just going to say it if you want to beep it, the Frazzle Drip tape. He told me about that. He said, I just saw it 3 days ago. He time traveled so much that he just saw it 3 days ago. And he's like, Daryl, don't make me say it. Don't make me say it. And I was like, well, you have to tell me now, like, what is this? And he said that, she cuts off this little girl's face. And the girl's screaming, like, why are you doing this? Please kill me, things like that. And she's kind of mocking her, like holding it over her face like a mask and mocking the kid. And yeah, he was like gritting his teeth. I could tell you, and shaking his fist while this was happening. And he said that their politician is going to be publicly executed. And like the Clintons are going to be publicly executed. He said that he told me we're going to have a black president named Barack Hussein Obama, and this was like a couple years after Saddam Hussein just got executed. I was like, really? He said,
Yeah, I know. That was kind of weird. I was like, what?
Yeah. And he said he's going to try to claim he's from where was he from? He was from Kenya, and he's going to like claim to be a foreign nationalist, you know, to try to avoid treason charges. Yeah, and he said that there's going to be. He told me about 10 days of darkness.
What about that?
Well, he said it's going to be a way to. It's almost going to be the lockdown again, in the sense that it's going to be a way to make sure everybody's at home because you have to watch this kind of thing. But he also said it's a way to switch over to Tesla power, like unlimited energy Tesla power. He told me Tesla was actually like, I don't know if he said if he was an ET or a channeler, but he basically said that he was getting this technology from ET. Like he was making it, but he was getting all this technology out from an outside source that was like giving it to him. And yeah, I mean, what else did he say? Yeah, and it was just really nuts. Just all the, and I didn't know what to think. He said we finally blow up that damn black cube, and I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Mecca," and he said we blow it up. And I said, "Why is it so important?" He said a meteorite fell down there a long time ago, and we melted down for the iron and gold to make ships for the programs. He's like ships up there. He said we have to get into the game. You know, like we can't just stay on Earth anymore. We have to kind of evolve and get into the game of the wars that are happening up there. We have to contribute. And
just real quick on Mecca, because I think I'll probably include a picture overlay. So that's been kind of coming up in my awareness, and it looks like a circuit board. If you look at, a friend was just showing me this the other day, like energetically, you've got the big black cube, and and I've been seeing in visions over the last couple of months, like this black cube technology that's kind of like a control system, like AI control system, and it's kind of keeping us into like into the matrix, you could say, like holding this matrix and veil of illusion up. Did he say anything? And also about Mecca, I think it was just a few days ago, I was getting, like, I was feeling it, like maybe they were using it to conjure up things, because people go and pray towards that. I don't know too much about it, but a little bit of digging that I've done, it's like harvesting energy, and it looks kind of like a circuit board. What do you have did he say anything else on that, or do you have any comments on that?
Well, my comments are, he told me about the Arch of Babylon. It reminded me of that they had in the courtyard of the Vatican. He said they're going to bring the Arch of Babylon to the courtyard of the Vatican. And he said it's an active portal. And he said the reason why there's so much fighting in the Middle East is because it has more portals than anywhere else in the world. But he said that you can't see it or use it because you're a third density being. He said third density beings can't see or use portals. He said that's why they had to push you up in the fifth density before you could walk through that looking glass, that portal. He said it's something, and the reason how he appeared in front of me, and you know how he appeared on the side of his desk and then in front of me. He said naturally occurring portals happen all with around the world. He said, and when you open the door, two portals appeared, and I just merely walked through them. He said because I'm fifth density. And he told me he was wearing like a belt, you wouldn't be able to see me, things like that. But yeah. And that's what I know about as far as portals go. I don't know. He didn't go into Mecca very much. Okay. But yeah, like he said we blow it up. And he said because, I mean, this goes like kind of controversial. If you want to edit it out, I don't care. But I mean, he just told me this. So this is like kind of and this kind of has to do with the map. Because he told me that North America would become one. And Trump tweeted this thing about, he said that Canada, United States, and Mexico would become one nation. Alaska would go back to Russia. I think he did say something about Greenland and Iceland, but I was just, he was just throwing one fastball at another at me that I couldn't remember everything. It was almost 20 years ago. And he told me that all worlds have a duality, and the duality of many worlds are things like the masculine and the feminine, and those are more like two dualities that kind of work together. But he said the Earth is quite different. There's no world like Earth. And he told me that the duality of the Earth is the Anglo-Saxon and the Satanist. And he said it's more like two opposing forces that are kind of like pushing for dominance, to be the established force. That's more like what our duality is. And that we're taking Mexico and we're going to, he said we're going to push the Mexican people down to the Yucatan Peninsula where Mexico bottlenecks. Kruger's going to help us. We'll win the war in about 4 years. He said the border right now as it stands is just too vast. He said no matter what scenario we run through Project Looking Glass, Mexico will invade the United States. Like there's nothing we could do to stop it. So the border has to become smaller. So it's just going to be one North American Union. And then eventually we're going to take back our original Indo-European borders, is how he put it. And that's why we blow up Mecca and things like that, because it's ours now. And yeah, and if I question anything, if I said this isn't right, you can't do this to people, he would just say, we must ensure the survival of the Anglo-Saxon. The Anglo-Saxon is the true potential of Earth. Without the Anglo-Saxon, we will not go beyond fifth density. Without the Anglo-Saxon, we will not reach our true potential. And he said that to me like several times. And that's why I remember it, because I was questioning everything he was talking about, everything he was saying. And he said, that's just the way it is. Like, that's the duality of the Earth. That's the way it is.
Interesting. Huh. So that kind of goes to the, like the bloodline deal. It kind of reminds me of.
Well, he said that we originally came from the asteroid belt, like Caucasian people. And we were in a war. It was Tiamat, I think is what he called it. But we were in a war with like the Draconian Empire. That world was blown up. We tried to go to Mars. The fragments hit Mars. It really destroyed a lot of the water on Mars. They used a certain kind of weapon to destroy the water. So we eventually came to Earth. And he said that the Slavic people are the most spiritually advanced people on Earth. But he said, like the Northern European, like the Anglo-Saxon interbred with the Neanderthal. And he said, that's what that bump is on the back of your head, that point you have on the back of your head, that's a Neanderthal trait. He said, only people with Neanderthal DNA have that bump. And since the Neanderthal had a direct connection to the Earth, that gave us a direct connection to the Earth. And he said that's like what you need. You need like a very spiritually advanced people to have a direct connection to the Earth to be able to get above fifth density. And if you can't get above fifth density, then your world dies. It just dries up and dies pretty much. And he said that ninth is the highest we know of. Not even ninth density beings know anything higher than ninth. He said there could be something higher than ninth, but we don't know. And yeah, so he went into that, and that was kind of like strange. I didn't expect it to come that way. And he said that like African Americans are the true, or Africans, sub-Saharan Africans are the true natives of Earth, is how he put it. And I think he said Aboriginals as well. He said because most worlds aren't like this close to their star, and that's like a big reason why we age quicker. Our years are so short. Most worlds are much further away from their star than we are. And yeah, we're kind of like refugees on Earth almost, is how he explained.
Wow. Very interesting. I mean, that's a lot to just almost 20 years ago get hit with all that information.
Yeah, and he told me I was a clone. He said you were killed on Mars the third day you were on Mars. He was kind of explaining things to me, and that kept on running through my head, and I was having like a panic attack about it. So as he was telling me other stuff, I really was like kind of losing it. And I said, but what does it matter? You know, I'm a clone. And he said, Daryl, you don't understand. He said, they were able to salvage your consciousness. And I said, well, what does that mean? And he said, they were able to make a body just like you, that is like you in every way, and they put your consciousness in it. And I said, well, what's the consciousness? And he said, your soul, if that makes you feel any better, the part that makes you, you. And I was kind of just like running in my head, like I have kids, like, you know, I'm a clone. Like that was kind of just repeating through my head. But yeah, I mean, he told me a lot of stuff, and it was a long time ago, but you know, I was able to remember.
Mm-hmm.
So.
All right, fantastic. Well, so we've been going for about 2 hours now, and so that was a lot of kind of the Earth stuff, really. So I think in part 2 we can get into more of the off-world stuff, kind of dig into your memories and the Taigetans, the Pleiadians, and yeah, I've been seeing some of these Pleiadian beings too, and get into Solar Warden a little bit. But but yeah, that was fantastic. Is there anything that you'd like to kind of end on and then tell people? Is there anything you've got coming up that you would like to share with people? And I know you're speaking. Well, we are both speaking at the Rebels of Disclosure conference in May, hosted by Journey to Truth podcast too. So I'll have links for that in the video description.
Yeah, Journey to Truth. That's my next I don't do a lot of conferences. I'm in the midst of working on a book right now.
I was
It's
gonna say you
difficult.
need a book. Like you
Yeah,
need to have a book for sure.
yeah, and yeah, my website is daryldjames.com, DARYL, D is in Delta, James.com. But I mean, I'll see you next time. I mean, on the next episode, and
Yeah.
then I'll kind of put my thoughts in and where I think it's happening. But this whole event with the map is like a very I didn't think that would happen. You know what I mean? Like he told me, and I've said this in prior things that Mexico, all of North America will become one, and I was told about that, and Russia would become the next world power, and the whole thing that's happening with Afghanistan. He told me we're going to lose Afghanistan, but we do it on purpose, and it's a way to show our goodwill that the United States is disarming. Remember how we lost so many planes and weapons and everything in Afghanistan? They took it from us. He said that was done on purpose. He kept on saying things like it's all a show. Get your popcorn. He was like saying things to me that I didn't understand, but he knew I would like get it in the future. And he was saying this, and he said that like the Ukraine war. That has to do a lot with like adrenochrome and things like that. But the reason why we're sending all our tanks and weapons there and they're just being blown up, he said that's more of a sign of like goodwill of the United States that we're disarming, and and Russia's going to become the next world power. China will become the next economic power. All the world's gold is in the catacombs of the Vatican, pretty much. We're the descendants of the Atlanteans, he said. The Library of Alexandria, before it was burned down, all that information was put into the catacombs of the Vatican. Science isn't real as we know it. History is a complete lie. Even mathematics and things like that, it's not what it could be. Yeah, I mean, he told me, and he said all this would be released eventually to the public. But he said the gold, the Library of Alexandria, like our true history, what's actually truth, all of that will be released to the public in my lifetime, is how he put it.
Wow. So he was saying, this is the positive timeline.
Yeah, this is our positive. And he said it's going to be so much better than you thought. Yeah, he said like, we're not going to work for money. Money's going to work for us. Everybody's going to be able to take nice vacations. You don't have to worry about money again, but everybody has to work. He said, like, we're going to have to try to build like a new infrastructure, a new economy. We're going to keep the existing companies just because of that they're already there. The infrastructure of Walmart and things like that. We're going to keep all that because it's already available. But those companies are going to be gone. Yeah, much more. He said med beds would be available to the public, things like that. He said, there will be no more, disabilities, and no more, children born with, missing arms, things like that. This is all a thing of the past. He said that this isn't going to exist anymore. And he said like the reason why we age so rapidly is because they poison our air and our water and our food and everything else. He said our true life expectancy is over 800 years. And yeah, so we'll live a lot longer. Like the Tigetans, he said there was over 3,000 years is their life expectancy. But they're one of the oldest people in the universe, and they've been like slowly kind of augmenting themselves. They can't do it too quickly, but they slowly augment themselves throughout millions of years and get them longer and longer. And we'll start doing the same.
Wow. Very interesting. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Daryl. And for those who are watching, you can find Daryl on his website. If you'd like to come see us speak in person at my favorite conference of the year, Rebels of Disclosure Conference, there will be a link for that in the video description, as well as Daryl's website. And yeah, I'm looking forward to having you on again. You also have tons of other interviews too available. I know Journey to Truth has interviewed you a lot, but yeah, I'm super excited about this information starting to come out. And please give this video a like, drop a comment, let us know your thoughts on this, and I will see you guys later. See you later, Star Brothers and Sisters. Bye. Thanks again, Daryl.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in. Please hit that like button and also join us at the best conference of the year, Rebels of Disclosure, hosted by Journey to Truth podcast. This May 12th through 15th in Grafton, Illinois. It is a fantastic time. We have so much fun there. Come meet Soul Family and learn something new. Tickets will be in the video description. Don't forget to like this video, drop a comment, subscribe, and I will see you later, Star Brothers and Sisters.